There it is. We are live. Okay. Next up on the agenda is the good of the cause. Karen tells me there are no emails. Nobody is knocking at the Zoom window to come in.
Nope.
Nope. Next up is discussion, budget discussion. Attached two sets of documents, hopefully that you took a chance to review and digest a bit. First up is BOCES annual meeting information booklet. And then Roger and Dana posted several questions for the board to address, including free meals, tax rate, and the social studies issue that we've been discussing. I think after a brief introduction, we'll like to open the floor up and then get everybody's opinion of these three items so that we get a good consensus on where we can go with it. So, Roger, if you
Sure.
can.
Yeah. I hope you got a chance to read the questions that we provided you with. A couple of things. First of all, my apologies for posting so many documents. I didn't really intend for you to read them all, just for you to to see some of the background. The social studies position that I presented last week was done rather quickly and without that I thought the adequate background. So I did provide you with that just so you knew where it's coming from. Probably the best explanation is that brief Wall Street Journal article that was posted there. American Needs History and Civics Education to Promote Unity. So that, I think, probably did a pretty good job of articulating, what some of our interests are in the social studies area. But as far as the other ones go, the free meals, I think that we are clear on. Yes, we understand that that would be a transfer out of the general fund to continue the free meal program that will end September 30th.
Correct.
Yeah, will end September 30th, and this would allow us to continue it through the end of next year. The tax rate question, we're going to clarify a little bit for you today if we can, but it's hard, and I'll tell you why in a second. And then the social studies question really comes down to where you want to go on that. And we have a few different options on there. So first of all, are there any questions about the free meal point? Or is that free meals? That's pretty self-explanatory. The tax rate question, Dana and I were talking about this today. We know that we presented this to you with a high end of 1.68% with a low end of 0% increase. We just want to be a little bit clearer now because the state budget, since our last meeting, the state budget, I was going to talk about that a little bit in my superintendent's report. But the state budget has come in with additional funding, and it's additional funding both from the state and from the federal government, both from the December law that was passed, and then most recently the March law that was passed, the ARPA, the American Recovery Plan Act, ARPA, that's what they're calling it, right? And so that's approximately $1 million of additional funding for like Placid over the course of 2-3 years. The state budget increased our funding approximately $1,000,000 for next year, more than we were anticipating. So, when we look at the tax cap versus the 0% increase, we wanted you to know that probably the way it would work out, and we're saying probably because all of this is just becoming, all this information is just coming to us now. So between now and next week, when you vote on the final budget, Dana's going to fine tune these numbers. But right now, everything's coming every day, so it's not 100%. But here's the general estimate that if you were to decide on doing the tax cap, we could provide essentially everything that we've already discussed, plus everything that is here, and then it would require approximately $200,000 in additional fund balance. If we went with a 0% increase, we would probably require approximately $500,000 in use of fund balance. And of course, somewhere in between would be somewhere in between. So when you decide, when you talk about whether you want to go 0 or 1.68 or somewhere in between, know that there are some other numbers at play, and that is the use of the fund balance. And then the final number that Dana is working with right now, we're just estimating, is how the federal money will impact the budget. Do you think I got that fairly accurately, Dana?
Yes.
Okay. So
The federal money is what really kind of
yeah, it's a wrench in the works.
changes it up in terms of how we want to allocate it.
Yeah.
Because I call it the December money, the $315,000. It has one set of criteria, and then the most recent money of about $730,000, they have a slightly different set of criteria in terms of how you can allocate it. And that's where it's kind of a moving target as to how much to allocate and into what we allocate it for, because there are slightly different criteria.
So not, the federal funding would not negate, if we went to a 0, it wouldn't negate the $500,000
Correct.
because it has contingencies to it,
Yes.
correct?
Yes, well,
Yeah.
the $315,000 has fewer strings attached to it, so you can basically use it's pretty wide open as to what you can use that for. One of my most recent additions, I have that amount in as other federal money, and it does reduce the fund balance even at 0% because of that $315,000. If you take that $315,000 out of the revenue source, then yes, you're looking at about $500,000 fund balance with a 0% tax levy increase.
And Joan, I want to apologize. We've been muted while we're having this conversation. Were you able to hear that?
Yes, very well. I can hear you like really clear, but Dana is a little bit harder.
Okay. Do you have any questions based on what you're saying?
Not at this point, no.
Okay.
So I had a question. It had been mentioned.
Is your mute on?
I'm unmuted. Yeah.
Okay,
Um,
sorry.
It was mentioned earlier on, but this was at a time when we knew nothing. This is before the election, before everything. That there was a concern about, well, we're getting this money now, but there may come a time in the future where we pay a huge penalty.
Right.
And so for me, one of the things that I'm worried about, I would like to, stay as close to 0 as we could for the tax base. But at the same time, if we're just going to be paying for that in 3 to 5 years.
Right. So when the federal money runs out, then there won't be anything to replace it, except perhaps for fund balance. But yes, that's right. It's being referred to, at least in I know my circles, as a fiscal cliff.
Right.
Right. That that if you rely on, for us, it's just say $315,000 every year for 3 years, and then the fourth year you don't have it, and nothing replaces it, then you won't be able to afford some things. So what you hope is that what you're spending some or much of that money on is not required to be sustainable over the long term. That it's more year by year, short term. So, for example, let's say the free lunches, right? If we're going to do that for 1 more year, but not 2 more years, right? So that's $115,000. Is that what it was?
In addition to
Yeah.
the 90 that we
Right. So
allocating.
that's $115,000 that will not be allocated next year or the year after next for that. So that's a 1-year expenditure, right? Likely, unless the board decides to find ways to continue it, right? Or say the purchase of a vehicle like a Suburban, which we're working on right now. The purchase of a Suburban, $45,000-$50,000. You would not be paying that enough for another, say, 6 or 7 years. So that's sort of where what we're looking at. So when we say whether something's sustainable or not, that's what we're referring to.
But it's not we're not looking at a situation pulling, it's just the temporary funding that we're talking about. It's not that
Yes.
they're going to penalize us in the future. Like, you remember when we gave you all that money? Well, now we're going to give you even less than we've ever given you.
Yeah. So the state increase, you can never say there's an absolute assurance here.
Sure.
But the state increase has been articulated by the legislature as the first of 3 years to get foundation aid to a higher level, the one that they were shooting for back in 2006, and then to maintain it from then on. So we expect the state funding to be maintained, and we would of course expect the federal funding to no longer be available after September of 2023. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the other issue. The December money, you have to use it up by 22. The most recent money is 23.
So Dana, if we don't use this money per se this year for anything extra, does that go into like our fund balance savings account thing for a rainy day per se?
The money has to be allocated into a special aid fund. It's basically our we call it our F fund. So it's a federal grant, like our titles, our Title I funds, our IDEA. So in theory, that's supposed to kind of, you spend it the year you get it. If you don't spend it all, they do have carryover where you can tap into it later, and it kind of sits in the state, because what you have to do is every year for these programs, you list what you want to spend the money on, and then at the end of the year, you show what you spent the money on. And if you didn't spend all of it, they just don't give it to you. And it kind of sits there. This will be kind of unique because they're saying it needs to be spent by, you have, in essence, 2 fiscal years plus a few extra months to spend $730,000. Yeah. So they haven't clarified as to what happens come September 30th, 2023. If you haven't spent it all, do you lose it? They haven't really said what happens to that. So it doesn't go automatically into our general fund, which then would roll right into our unassigned fund balance.
Now, just to complicate things one step further, because everything's a moving part, right? We're talking about fund balance because, of course, you know that we're over the 4% cap. Now, there's two additional pieces of information. One is that we were told that they were going to raise the cap to 8 or 6%, and it didn't happen. So the cap is still 4%, which means we're, I would say, 2 to 3 times over the cap.
We're about 12%.
Yeah, that's the first thing. The second thing is, and I gave you this in information for the board, we just learned last week that we're going to be audited by the comptroller's office. That's a normal thing. You get audited every 5 to 10 years. It's been 5 years. We're going to be audited. We know that the auditor is going to say your fund balance is too large. So there's good reason to be looking at our fund balance and either reallocating it or making use of it right now.
Yeah, to kind of go back to your question a little bit in terms of looking down the road. I mean, that's one of the things that I do is look at it so you don't have those fiscal cliffs, and you look and you say, okay, how can something be sustainable? That's where the board decides what's important to keep and not keep, and then you make adjustments along the way to keep those programs going. And that's sort of what falls on the business manager's job, is to do that, to find ways, shifting resources and things like that. Like the meals, that'd be ideal going forward, where we can keep that going. Ideally, it'd be even better where the federal government says all meals are going to be paid for like they did this year, and it takes it off to the plates of the districts. I think there's still a possibility that that's going to happen. I mean, for them to extend it to September, who's to say they don't then extend that further out? That's what they did this past year for us to be able to get the reimbursements
that we've been getting is because of that. So that's
always,
that's an unknown, but it's always a possibility. And then you make changes where it's $115,000, but now it becomes a moot point because the federal government is reimbursing us.
Dana, when you talk, you have to remember to unmute. I'm sorry.
I did.
So when the,
Okay.
Yes.
that funding comes in, you can't directly put it in the unrestricted fund balance. However, you can, sort of the example you use for the $115,000, we no longer have that expense. So that can be reallocated.
Yes.
And we see that like the last couple of years, we've allocated $90,000 to go to the cafeteria funds. It's been in place for a number of years, but we haven't spent all $90,000 for the last 3 years.
That goes into our
Unassigned fund balance.
Any other questions?
Sorry. Hope we're not confusing the matter more. But
So what do we need to do now?
I think,
you want to work through the issues?
yeah, leave that settling and go on to the next. You know, we handle the school lunches. Now we do the.
Well, I guess that would be a question. I guess one question is, and it really, this is not a vote, right? But this is going to help give Dana direction on how to complete the budget so that when you get it next week, it's one you're going to vote yes on, right? So I guess the first question is, do we want to keep, as a board, do you want to keep the free meals in?
I think that.
I think that's a good idea, given our community's current circumstances. I think that those who rely on, there's going to be a lot of people that would qualify for free lunch anyway. And, a lot of people that it can definitely be a big help. So I think that leaving that in would be good.
I totally agree with that. I think that
We can't hear John.
you can't hear me.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Joan.
I think that's a great idea because I know a lot of people in the community are really struggling, and being able to take lunches or the cost of lunches away would really help them out.
Okay, with free lunches.
Any other thoughts or comments?
No, I think it's a great idea.
Okay. So the tax rate question is really, whether you want to go to the maximum limit of the cap. There are, pros and cons to this, right? The pro for the cap is that if you don't use the entire cap, then the next budget, which you have no control over because there's a tax cap always in place every year, has to build off of the last budget. So the lower the last budget is, the lower your next tax cap raise is going to be. So that's what people in Dana's world refer to as leaving money on the table. But this is one of those years that everything has changed. That's why we have a 0% option here for you, right? So you could do the 1.68%. You could do the 0. You could come up with another consensus number. I had put out as a possibility of 1. Just knowing that there will still be some fund balance in there as revenue, and that Dana will calculate what that is, and it'll be somewhere between that 200 and 500 number we think right now.
You have to not have zero then, right? You gotta have somewhere in the middle.
I don't think we have to.
You don't have. You could have a 0. You could have a 1.68.
Yeah, no, but if it's going to affect our amount next year.
So so next year we'll build off of. So right now the tax levy is 16.7, right?
Yes.
$16,700,000. So if it's a 0% increase, then next year's tax cap will build off of $16,700,000. If it's a 1.68% increase, it'll build off of $16,900,000 something dollars. And if it's a 1% increase, it'll build off of somewhere in between that, 16 million, 800, et cetera.
A
So it
one-
will
yeah.
build off of something. It's just whether or not it builds off of the higher number.
A 1% would give us a $167,000 increase versus 1.68, which was $281,000. So you're looking at,
Should this be the year that maybe we try to keep it at 0%? I mean, I've heard a lot in chatter, just being around the community, getting signatures for the school board that, I don't know, maybe this is the year that we do that. I don't know.
one of the things, and this is something I brought up and I talked to
Other
other
business managers,
and
and
it's
it's really where I got
not the concept, but the talking point is,
in the end, our fund balance is money that the community has already
given the district. And by having excess amounts of fund balance, keeping it zero, we're basically giving back money that has already been given to the districts through previous tax levies.
So, and it's true, you ask most business managers, say you don't leave money on the table because it could compound. The ASBO out there, which is the New York State's School Business Association, they will always throw things out
in terms of what was left on the table each year from schools because they didn't maximize their tax levy.
For us, we could have gone up to
6% last year, and we did 4.98%. It could have been 6.02% last year, but we didn't go up. We left $180 some thousand on the table. But
as Roger said, given the circumstances that we are in, by way of federal money, by way of a little more state money, by way of a healthy fund balance, there's a good argument to be made in our situation of doing
zero.
I think the zero, if we're going to get audited, and they're going to say you have too much fund balance, it makes sense to use that. And at least so we could say like, hey, we're trying. We're going to try to bring it down.
Right.
Could be your parting gift, Roger, to the community.
What's that?
It'll be your parting gift to
Oh,
the community.
Yeah, really, geez.
Right.
That's zero.
Yeah, I fully, that's been my sentiment all along. It's the taxpayers' money that's sitting there. And to just put a message out there. So next year, we are punished. I don't think, yes, it's a lot of money, it's significant, but I think we can make enough for it on balance again next year. So, Joan, any comments? No.
Sorry, it takes me a minute to unmute. I like the idea of the 0% tax levy. And there's so many things that have been presented to us. So I don't know, maybe I just feel like, kind of asking Dana if he was in our shoes, what would he choose? And I know that that's not fair, that this is up to us, but I guess
Okay, he has an
0%. What was that?
I'm going to tell you a secret. He's got an answer.
Fighting at the bit over there. He can't wait to talk.
I'm sure he has an answer, but anyway, that.
No, I think it
That's
makes
where I'm coming
sense.
from.
I do. A year ago, if you would have asked me that question, I would have said absolutely not because of the uncertainty. But we're truly in a different financial situation. The one thing that we're not even throwing out there right now is what is our potential
savings going to be this current year?
I mean, I've been showing you
budget status reports, performance reports all year long, and we have been under expenses all year long. Our revenue is on target, and
we could have a potential
fund balance
of a couple of $100,000.
So, and that hasn't even factored into
More than that.
I'm
Oh,
being
you're
conservative.
being conservative. He's always being conservative.
I'm being
We all
conservative.
know it's gonna be
I don't
big.
want to throw out, a huge number and then.
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
But that has not even been part of the conversation yet. There's a very good likelihood that we're going to have
a decent fund balance at the end of this year as well, that even if we're spending $400,000 next year,
we could conceivably
put that back in our fund balance from this year.
and kind of be back in the same spot of
We're still sitting at 12% because we went zero, but yes, of our expenses.
So that is a possibility, which
For
for me, I look at it as
it goes back to what we're talking about with
the fiscal cliff.
If we're 3 years out,
That fund balance will then help
ease that, so that cliff isn't
a cliff, because we do have money that we can tap into over the next 3 to 5 years.
And that was my concern when we had talked about the cliff before, was that I didn't want to go for zero and use some of our fund balance, but then, you can't do that forever. It's kind of like spending out of your savings account. Like eventually that ends and you have no money. So I didn't want to do that because that would be not fun. I mean, it'd be fun for you, Roger, because you wouldn't be here. You would laugh it up.
Sounds like we have a consensus. Yes. Sounds like a consensus there, Rick. Yeah, okay, so Dana will work off of a 0% increase. So the third issue, the social studies. Now, last meeting, I presented option 2 to you. And so I wanted to provide you with some other options. And there's 3 other options here. The first one, number 1, is sort of the more traditional option. If you want to improve social studies and provide more coursework and more flexibility, instead of having a 1-year teacher on special assignment, add a social studies teacher, a sustainable one that teaches all year long, no teacher on special assignment, just an additional social studies position. So that is one. Pros to that one, I think it would be beneficial for our social studies program. Cons to that one is that's a sustainable position, right? So that would have to be sustained or cut down the road, right? So that's a new one. Option 2 is the same one we talked about last week. Option 3 is a little bit different. So let me share what that is, right? So this is to recognize, again, assuming that some of the documents or my discussion last week was persuasive in some way. Now, option 3 would maintain the 4 middle high school social studies positions and then provide a non-specific $25,000 amount to be used to provide this kind of curricular support and assessment that I was talking about. Now, how would that be used? Likely it would be used through the use of an outside consultant or a series of professional development experiences that have costs associated with them, right? So this is, again, something we're familiar with here. We did this with the math program a few years ago. We saw some gaps in the math program. We hired an outside consultant for the math program. The outside consultant came in and worked with our teachers. So there was professional development. There was collegial collaboration in terms of articulating our curriculum, and some improvements were made. So we have that experience also from our past. So we have the number of teachers, okay? And then number 4 would just be to not provide any additional resources just for social studies, just to say no to that item. So that's what I've provided for you. I think that's probably a pretty good number of options. So, we're trying to figure out whether to put a new teacher in or not, or whether to put in an amount for additional curriculum resources like a consultant of an amount of approximately $25,000. And if you could give us some direction there, we'd be good.
Well, I want to say that I want to explain and preface this by saying that I'm paraphrasing, and I've written down just a variety of notes because I've heard from many community members over the last 4 or 5 weeks. I think there was an article in the Enterprise or the Lake Placid News that talked about this potential position coming up. So I've heard from parents, community members, and even some faculty members. And so again, I'm paraphrasing, but I want to bring up their thoughts or concerns about this. They questioned the timing of it. They would like to know what the purpose and the goal of having someone specific for social studies and the justification for it. Some of the faculty members questioned what possible, gaps that there might be, that some of them felt that they were already meeting the curriculum and following Common Core, next gen standards, and they feel that they're teaching what they need to teach in the classroom. There is a concern with the current climate in our country right now and various movements that maybe the whole push behind all of this is to bring in a lot of the social issues right now that are causing upheaval, and parents are concerned about that. And it's tough to hear, but these are some of the terms that they used. Woke indoctrination, politicizing our classrooms, and they, one mother was concerned that the age of her child, if there are these topics that are being discussed or brought into the rooms, that her child would not have developed enough complex critical thinking skills to be able to make their own opinion. So that's some of the feedback that I got. And then it kind of went into what might be kind of a hierarchy in our community here in Lake Placid, New York. What is our hierarchy of social justice issues, which there are many. It's not just race or gender or socioeconomic issues. There's lots of issues. And most of them felt that if any money was to be spent on anything, that unique to Lake Placid is the fact of our socioeconomic gap that we have in our community, and the children that live just above the poverty level here, who discreetly go home on Friday afternoons with their backpack full of food to get them through the weekend. The fact that we have a record number of families that access the area food banks here in Lake Placid. And if you want to bring someone in, then we need to bring someone in that's going to help us with the socioeconomic gap in our community. And they felt overall, most of these people felt that that's at the top of our list. And if that's what the goal of this consultant is, that they would go with it. The other issue, a couple of parents of high school students brought up, is the LGBTQ issue in our district. And maybe we don't think it exists, but it does. And there are students that are being bullied, and that could be a good topic. And lastly, I think maybe we've seen in our country the lack of respect for appreciating other people's opinions and ideas. And that seems to have gone the wayside, and maybe teaching our children, even from a young age, that listening to someone else's viewpoint doesn't mean you're against them. It just means you have a different viewpoint. And I personally feel, now I'm stepping away from paraphrasing, but I personally feel if we're going to spend any money on anything, that I feel we need to look at those avenues, whether it be allocating funding in the fall to buy school supplies for those kids that can't afford it, and dumping 10, 15 grand into doing that every September. I talk frequently with Erica Bazzaio in the Saranac Lake Central School District, who is the community liaison and does many of these community outreach programs. And so I think in a nutshell, parents want to know what the direction of this is, and they want it focused on what the needs of our community is, and not necessarily the needs on a national movement. So there you have it. And I personally might vote for number 3 if the money comes down and we know specifically where it's going, or I'd have to go with D, put no money towards it. Thanks.
Daniel?
I think I would agree in that I would want to know specifically what programs, and I guess maybe maybe the first step is you hire a consultant to find out where your gaps are. I do think that one of the things that is lacking in our community is civic knowledge. And I think that, you know, in what I've seen in kids that I know is, you know, a general apathy towards the political process or political discourse. You know, and there's you know, I think that could be an avenue that would be very important, is to teach that civic duty, to teach those things that may be missing, if that's what's missing. I'm not familiar with our social studies program. I don't know how much they teach on that. So I think that maybe a consultant would be to get an outside opinion if the department feels like that would be a benefit to them. You know, if we feel like, again, I don't know what's taught in the social studies courses, so I can't say where the gaps are, but maybe a consultant would be good. But also, I think that social studies, civics, history is a very important and sometimes maligned department. It's sometimes viewed as not important. So I would hate for us to have to repeat our history because we didn't learn from it, as the saying goes. So I would think that either the first three options would be good.
Joan, do you want to jump in?
I'm leaning towards number 3 as my first option, or number 4. I think that it'd be good to have somebody from the outside looking in and seeing where we are lacking in the social studies. I just hate the idea of jumping in with a full-time permanent social studies teacher.
Are there areas that we're aware of right now in civics? You know, if you look at the Common Core standards, soon to be the next gen, those issues should be addressed, you know, by whomever is instructing in our high school civics courses. So I'm wondering if current faculty members might be somewhat taken aback by thinking that they're not hitting the mark in these areas. And I don't know if they are or not, but it is part of what they're supposed to be teaching, are, you know, a lot of these current issues that we are, you know, facing. So I don't know.
I think that's part of the danger in picking one department and then saying bringing in a consultant is the first reaction is, what am I doing wrong?
No, definitely. And that's kind of what I've heard somewhat from
yes.
faculty, is that, you know, why all of a sudden is social studies being, you know, under the microscope, and what is it that we're doing wrong? I don't know.
Well, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious why social studies is under the microscope. I mean, we just had a mob of thousands of people almost tear down our republic. So I think we absolutely should spend the money, the investment. It's clear to me that is an issue, but I agree with Colleen on number 3, I guess, because I don't know about creating a position that then we got to pay for. You had a term for it.
Legacy costs?
Legacy costs. Yeah. The legacy time. Legacy costs. The legacy costs. And so
I think maybe I'm wrong.
that gives me the most pause to it, is I think, you know, the police department, the village police department has reviewed their policies as it relates to policing. And so I think our schools is right for it. Though I have no to the legacy costs. So is that one? Was that option 1? No to option 1.
I just hope that as a board or as a district that we don't feel pressured that we have to kind of jump on the bandwagon for whatever reason, because I look back to, I don't know, I think it was like 2 years ago when everyone in the surrounding area, they were jumping on the bandwagon and hiring the resource officer for their school, and we didn't. And to be quite frank, if you probably polled those districts now, most of those people probably don't have jobs anymore, with the defund the police movement and whatever. And I just feel like I personally don't want to feel like we're pressured to jump onto anything that, again, I feel 25 grand is a lot of money to spend on a consultant. And if we spent money, I still feel that there's issues in our district where that money could be better spent than having someone come in and potentially come up with, you've got a gap here, you've got a gap there. I feel like I don't know, that maybe we should trust in our current faculty that, you know, if there are gaps there that they're not hitting the mark on, that they'll look at it more closely. I don't know.
Martha?
Oh, I don't have an answer. I haven't picked one yet. Because I can see value in all of them. Martha, you have to unmute so Joan can hear you. Joan, I'm so sorry. I was just being wishy-washy.
The one that's not watching.
You're still not unmuted. Sorry.
There you go.
Okay, sorry. I think the best option probably is going to be to have a consultant come in, and their scope of work should be clear. And I don't think it should be limited to social studies. But maybe I'm going off into another issue that's a separate discussion.
I think it's the same discussion.
Okay.
I'm saying social studies, but I mean, it's the hot button issue of equality, equity, and inclusion. Whether it's being taught through social studies, I guess that's what it is. Social studies, right?
Well, it certainly is. Those issues become centered in social studies because of the focus on history, government, economics, and this is where those are centered. Obviously, they cross over into many other disciplines. Similar to like English and math, English, yeah, we're talking about, analyzing literature, but hopefully we're doing that in other areas too. But it's still centered in the English department. So I think you're justified in saying that's why social studies has that connection.
Where does the figure 25,000 come from?
It's a round number that, if you think about the last time we had a math consultant, we were talking about, it was a little over $10,000 that year for the consultant himself. Professional development, we know is expensive, and we thought $25,000 would be a round number that could contain the kinds of things that next year, as I put in here, the new superintendent could lead. How do you like that? But so there's no magic in that number.
It's all about, isn't it all about drawing the scope of what they can do? Like you said, if you make it to what are the gaps in our own teaching, how does it relate locally to our deficit and not a national?
Well, I think Roger brought up a good point when he was, saying, how most of the time it's focused in social studies, the diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think sometimes, including myself, when you say diversity, it's an immediate spotlight that it must have something to do with race. But diversity can also mean, in our district, the haves and the have-nots. I mean, there's a diverse group of children in a classroom where some little children have this type of housing, some have other. And I think
Some have written on everything.
absolutely not. Or some of these children here, the one time they get out of Lake Placid is in 8th grade when they go to Washington, D.C. And I just think that of anything and it's not that those other issues aren't important, because they are. But for us, particularly here, I still feel very strongly. And I heard someone recently say that there are children in our district, and I was saddened to hear that there's actually dirt floors in their home, or little children that don't get and things like that. So these things really bother me, even though all those other issues are important. For me personally, again, 25,000 for some consultant to come in that's probably going to hone in on the national issues instead of honing in on what we need here is a concern of mine. And I think we could get someone for less than $25,000 if we come in to help us figure out some of those other issues that are important to us, or at least I feel are important to our district.
Well, it sounds like the 25,000 would not go all to the consultant, but also some of the action steps that would come out of that, whether it's for professional development. And I would point out that we're not pushing anything else off the table by considering this. We're not saying, well, let's get rid of the free lunches and bring in the consultant instead. So I think that if we can add to our programming and enrich them, because I think too, the other thing that is unique in our area is we are a very isolated community. We bore the brunt of the pandemic very differently than many other school districts did across, in cities and in more urban areas or suburban areas. It's a very different experience for us up here. And I think that's because, we're a very sometimes sheltered, group. I grew up in Metro Atlanta and went to a public high school in Metro Atlanta. So I had a very different experience. I grew up in a majority Black high school and took civics and history courses with classmates that were very different than I was. And that enriched my experience. And so I think that one of the things that we have an opportunity to do here is if we can, find ways to enrich the program so that the students that are in our district, even though they don't have that diverse class space, in those different ways, that if we can enrich that program so that they can maybe open, I don't want to say this, they can maybe get a broader perspective from those courses, even though what we have here is sometimes a very narrow perspective. So I think that, but again, like Liam said, it's a little scary to be like, well, let's pull on a full-time staff person, with no direction. So I think that some development would be good there in that direction.
I'd like to see the money amount lowered, and I really want to have like more of a, this is what they're coming in to do. And, there are consultants that can come in and tell you that these are the grants that are available that will help with the socioeconomic gap, and this is how you access it. And again, I've talked at length with Erica in the Saranac Lake District, and I don't know. I just think that we really need to know where our money's going.
My first note when I saw that figure was changing it to up to 25,000. So that it's not, we're going to spend that. Agree with a lot of what's being said. Sorry. Agree with a lot of what's being said. I always go back to when the seniors, graduated seniors, 1 year, 2 year, come back and they present to the students as well as board and faculty. The number one by and far is what they report is just the opposite of what Daniel just said. They don't get that experience yet. When they get away to a university, to a college, now suddenly they get this bolus experience, and I haven't heard an answer to that, how we could enrich that, that gap. But that's where I'm thinking is, how do you take that $25,000 and do you get a consultant in here? Perhaps. Do you bring in different cultures that come in and present to the students, just as exposure to, like we do with a lot of things, dance, the arts, and that type of thing. So, personally, I'm not against putting a dollar value. I would like to say up to, and then I guess, defining more as to exactly what we're going to use that for, what the recommendations to the next superintendent will be.
Would you want to tap the collective experience and wisdom of the committee, you have a work group on diversity, equity, and inclusion?
I think I think we have to. We've embraced that committee. So with some bumpers on the gutters, so to speak, so that committee knows exactly, what our feelings are and our directives are, which you are the liaison for. So.
Well, the way that number 3 is worded does, like you said, if you said up to,
Mhm.
like this is the budget, it does say could include a consultant. So it's not
Right.
It's not definite that we're saying we're going to go find a consultant to come in and tell us which way's up. But at the same time, I think that having the resources available for even our current faculty to say we'd like to bring in these elements, to the program that may have an additional cost outside of their regular program costs.
One of the key individuals I thought of right away when I saw that was Wes Moore. We were at a conference,
Right.
Who's a motivational speaker, I guess he is, and he's written several books. But he would be the type of person that you could bring into a school system and enlighten everyone from the superintendent down to the janitorial staff to the bus drivers to everybody. So he's not a consultant, but he motivates diversity.
Can I talk a little bit on the budget? Because Mark, you brought up in terms of why $25,000.
One of the things when you look at all of this is, as I was just pulled up our budget, we have allocated
allocated $75,000 for professional developments that a teacher could tap into
to
explore these things in terms of enhancing their curriculum.
We have over
$8,000 for field trips to get kids out into other areas for that diverse experience. We have $3,000 to $5,000 to set aside for just assemblies for bringing in someone for the students. So
the 25,000 is just something there in terms of, all right, in addition, but we have over
close to $100,000
already allocated
in the budget
for a number of these
items that could be targeted
for
gaining more experience and bringing people in, or teachers developing it. Through this, you'll find that the BOCES, they do a lot of the workshops, and more are coming out and addressing this very issue that teachers can tap into, and it's budgeted already for it.
That's a great idea, Dana, that you just brought up. I know one parent mentioned it, and I forgot this, that and these different times during the year are really important. We just ended Black History Month, which was wonderful for the students. I don't know how much was done with that, but maybe we could do more with that in the future. But also in November is Indigenous Peoples Month, and what a great opportunity if we could get Ray Fadden from up on Onchiota to come down with the Native Americans and just bring that kind of thing into the schools. I don't know, getting the kids out to John Brown Farm. And I don't know how often they go there, but we've got that in our own backyard. And quite frank, I don't think any of my 5 children went there when they were here in the school. And we've got a wonderful state site. And just things like that. Maybe some of that money could be earmarked for that. I don't know, but I think there are some cultural things that we could bring in. Even Asian History Month, in our country. My niece and nephew are of Asian descent, and just bringing those things in would be important for the kids.
As usual, this board impresses me with how thoughtful and passionate you are about important issues. And I just want to thank you for being willing to express yourselves here and, and to be honest and to be forthright and to, provide us with some direction. Budgets, of course, are tangible items. And so it sounds to me like you would like us to work with a number, I'm just going to say approximately up to $25,000, that might be a consensus. Am I getting close to that? That could be a consensus amongst our group, that a fund like that could provide some incentive for us to explore, examine in one of many different ways. Again, like you said, I wrote that, and I wrote could because I'm not telling you what the money should be spent on right now. I think that's to be determined. But typically, when we don't have a fund of money like that specifically for a group, people assume that there is no money to do these things, and therefore that they can't afford the money to schedule a field trip to John Brown Farm or to bring in a speaker that costs $1,000 or $2,000. This would provide that incentive to take some further steps. Is that something, do you want us to go ahead and work with option 3 for the budget? Yeah.
Yes.
I think after all my monologues, I could probably agree to that. I just feel it's hard sometimes when you're out in the community and you've lived here your whole life and people grab you when you're walking around Mirror Lake or out on the trails at John Brown, or they're getting a hold of you and you feel an obligation that you need to speak on their behalf.
Sure.
And you need to advocate for them and hear them. They are the taxpayers. They're the ones that have their kids sitting in these chairs every day. And again, I feel very passionate about the little ones that don't have much. But I like the fact that money, if it's put aside, we could look in the future as to where we might want to spend that. So I'm good with that for whatever it's worth.
Well, thank you very much to Roger, Dana, and all the board for your inclusion in all this. I didn't mean to throw inclusion in there, but I did. So, thank you. All set with the budget?
I think that's all we were hoping for. Yes?
Oh, and more, I'm sure.
So what Dana will do with this discussion is he'll finalize the budget. He'll put it on board docs sometime between now and next meeting. Karen will post it on there. And there'll be on next Tuesday is our next meeting. Next Tuesday, there'll be a resolution to approve the budget. And, it's going to have in there a 0% tax levy increase. It's going to have somewhere in there up to $25,000 for the social studies ideas. It's going to have the money for free lunches, which I believe is already in there right now. Did I cover it all? And as we said, there's going to be some fund balance in there as a source of revenue, and Dana will calculate that. He'll do his magic, and we'll see how it all turns out. But that's what we're going to have for you for next meeting.
Thank you very much. On to reports, superintendent reports.
You're not tired of hearing from me yet? Even if you are, I guess I have to do it, huh?
That's
Okay, well, some of this is going to be repetitive because I do want to talk about the state budget. I'll give you some numbers on where things are. You probably could have read about some of this, but what I'll try and do is to talk about state funding and its impact here in Lake Placid on our school budget. So you know that last week the Assembly, the Senate, and the governor approved the state budget. So I'm just going to give you a very brief snapshot overview. The budget totaled $212 billion statewide. That was a 10% increase over the past year. And that includes all federal funds, and then a 3.8% increase without federal relief and federal. So in other words, it was 10% if you include federal funds. It was 3.8% if you don't include the federal funds. So it was still an increase even without the federal funds. So it wasn't just Washington's decisions. It was also our state legislature's decisions. And some of that was through revenue and some of that was through tax increases for high income people. Some of that was for tax increases on corporations. Some of that was for some of the new ideas, including the sports betting and the marijuana, although that I don't believe was calculated in. But all of those are sources of revenue or potential revenue. So how does that impact schools? So the school aid increase is $3 billion. And that makes a total of $29.5 billion statewide for school aid, all kinds of school aid. That was an 11% increase. In Lake Placid, we're looking at an increase of approximately, I said before, $225,000. That's about 7%. Now remember, that percentage is less than the average. Also, our state aid is less than the average because we're an average need district with high property values. Most of our revenue still comes from our property taxes. But state aid does make a difference, and you can see it here. So that those numbers don't include the federal allocations. So that's the December money, that's the Coronavirus Relief and Recovery Supplemental Appropriations Act. And the March money, that's the ARPA, American Rescue Plan Act. So that's all addition. That addition was approximately $1 million to be spent. And I mentioned this before, and Dana has figured all this stuff out. I appreciate all the work you've been doing on this in a very short amount of time through September 2023. But that's not a perfect thing because one law goes up to one area, one date, and one law goes up to another date. So we'll be receiving approximately $1 million over the course of time. Over the next 3 years, the state is promising $4.2 billion increase in foundation aid. That's $1.4 billion per year. So their plan is to fully fund foundation aid, which is great for high needs school districts because they're underfunded. Districts like ours are not underfunded for foundation aid. So we are called a Save Harmless district. And I could go into that, but we'll just leave it at that. That means that we will typically see a small percentage increase in foundation aid, even when the overall increase is large. This year, we're looking at a 2% increase in our foundation aid. We might see that next year and the year after as well. Sometimes it's 1%, sometimes it's less. It's rarely zero, although we have seen zero recently. There were some things that were predicted to happen that did not happen. I'm just going to remind you of a few things. A year ago, we were talking about a 20% state aid cut. And we were talking about all the cuts we were going to have to make, both in expenditures and personnel. And that never happened. We never received state aid cuts. At one point, they were reducing the allocation per month, but then that came back to us. So there was never a 20% cut in this year. Also, we were told that our BOCES aid and our transportation aid would all be consolidated into one pool, and then it would no longer be reimbursable. That was called consolidation. That didn't happen either. So all of that talk that was going on for the last 3 months didn't happen. That was the executive proposal. It failed when they got to the legislature. Also, you might remember that we were not going to be reimbursed. No district was going to be reimbursed for transportation aid for the use of buses when we were delivering meals last spring and last summer. That also changed. Now there will be reimbursement. For us, it's a very small number, so it's not going to break the bank. For other districts, it could be more significant. And then the other thing that I mentioned before that we were expecting was that the unrestricted fund balance cap would go up to 6% or 8%. One house had 6, the other one had 8. Somehow they ended up deciding on neither of those two, right? So it's still at 4, and that's where we are looking at fund balance. And just in other areas, I already mentioned the tax increases, and there's some property tax relief in here. So there's a lot of other things. There's some expansion of childcare. There's some additional money for pre-K, although we're one of the better funded pre-K programs right now, but there is additional money for pre-K. There's additional money for homeless support. There's additional money for broadband, which how that's going to be allocated. They're talking about families in need of being able to get a high-speed broadband for $15 a month. And then the worries we've mentioned also the fiscal cliff that we mentioned. Fiscal cliffs can come because federal aid runs out, and fiscal cliffs can also come if income tax increases like the ones that the state just passed expire. And these do have an expiration date. A future legislature will decide whether or not it's going to expire. So just putting in your head that sometimes these are moments that do change down the road, and sometimes they're continued, and that's just a wait and see. So the state budget has made a big difference, and we just spent 45 minutes talking about it. So I think we're going to stop talking about the state budget. Okay. Other things, COVID, right? Since we forgot about COVID there for a minute, right? COVID, we know, is still with us. We did learn about 2 positive cases over the vacation. They didn't have any impact on school because we were on vacation, but we still do have positive cases in the school community. So we're going to continue to practice our health precautions as we've been doing. One of the changes that I think can really be a game changer here is that high school students are now, who are 16 or older, are now eligible for the vaccine. So we're encouraging our eligible students and their families to get vaccinated. A number of our seniors are already vaccinated with at least 1 shot. Thank you to John Spear from Northwood, who contacted me today to let me know there's another vaccine clinic at Northwood, and they would welcome any of our students. I believe that's Thursday. Am I right about that, Martha? Thursday? Okay, I think it's Thursday, but I will clarify that.
Roger, how many took advantage of the free screening rapid test that you
Right.
offered?
So thank you.
Sorry.
So then on Sunday we had a free screening using rapid tests, and we had just a little over 100 people. I believe it was 104. We actually had a few more Monday that we were able to stretch it out for people who came back from vacation late.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, so we did have over 100 people who tested. I'm going to tell you that it was a fun Sunday morning. It was sunny and people were happy, and we had really a pretty good time considering we were working for all Sunday morning, the last day of vacation. But it was a good day. The testing was very successful. Everything went well. And I do want to thank people for that, because people came to work on Sunday, and I want to mention who they are. Thank you very much to Patty Mayberry, Kaylee Taylor, Amanda Cash, Michelle Kalina, Karen Angelopoulos. Where'd you go?
Just trying to save me.
Okay, thank you very much, Karen. Brandon Bosworth, Teresa Lindsay, Tammy Casey, and then we had 4 nurses who were actually administering the tests, and they were our elementary school nurse, Elise Stosiak, our middle high school nurse, Cora Clark, and then we had Amanda Rodriguez and Kristen Macron, who are nurses in the community. Amanda sometimes substitutes for us. And then Jonathan Wright came in later on to clean the whole place up, because we had all these people there on our Sunday, and it had to be cleaned and disinfected for Monday. Very, very grateful to Jonathan. So it was a very successful day, and I think everyone was happy that we did it, from the people who came to get tested to the people who were giving the tests and those of us who were providing support. So you'd think that there's nothing else going on except we actually have school going on right now, right? And classes started up again yesterday. And I'll just mention quickly, looking ahead, kindergarten registration continues, so it's ongoing. Our high school students and families are welcome to order their yearbooks now. There's a link in the most recent newsletter, so I hope that they will order their yearbooks. High school students starting today or tomorrow are beginning their course selections, right? A very normal thing. They sit down with the counselor and they decide what they're going to take next year. And I believe that people are looking ahead to next year, recognizing that it's going to be a much more normal year than this year, last spring has been. Spring sports start up in 2 weeks, but the fall 2 sports, or volleyball, they're playing. They actually have their first game. They might just be finishing up right now in our gym. So if you pulled in and you saw a bus, that was the bus from Peru. The volleyball team is playing. Also starting up, women's ensemble will be starting up their rehearsals. Jazz band will be starting up rehearsals. And planning is underway for a musical performance in the spring. And it won't be a traditional spring concert, but some kind of musical performance that we're getting ready for. So I think as the sun shines a little more brightly, things look much brighter here in many ways at the school district. And that is everything I've got.
Thank you very much.
That sounds great.
What was our score? We call it best. Did we score well?
We've added 1,000.
All right.
Good deal.
I assume that was positive in a good direction.
Positive negatives, yes. Information for the board. There were several items, the Rotary Club note, the audit letter from the Comptroller's Office, prom 2021. Let's see, and the article in the Hudson Valley News, which had an article on our own Dan Marvin. So hopefully you took the opportunity to look at those.
Written by our own Dan.
Yes. School health services for non-public school students is also one attachment in there. Any comments on any of those items? Okay.
Rick, I have a quick question.
Sure.
In reference to public schools with private schools, I think it was mentioned that we do something for St. Agnes School. Northwood has their own nursing, but do we also do something for North Country School? And is it for any student there, or is it for only like day students that live in Lake Placid? I wasn't sure what that meant.
So it is complicated, right? So we're supposed to provide medical services at our expense to district students who attend non-public schools. So there's 15 students who live in Lake Placid. Sorry, John. So there are 15 students who live in Lake Placid in our school district who attend North Country School. There's 30-something who attend Northwood. There's 48 who attend St. Agnes, I believe, maybe 43, something like that. So we're supposed to provide health services to them. We already do provide nursing services to St. Agnes, but we don't provide any other services to any of our other non-publics. North Country School has asked us if we can help, and we're going to. And that's because we want to, but also because we have to. And that's why I shared the law with you.
No, that makes sense. I just wasn't sure if it was like the whole North Country School that we're doing, or just the students that actually are district children.
It is hard sometimes to separate that out. And I don't know if we got to a point where we had to do that, how that would work. The way the law reads is that a student's home district should provide that compensation for whatever was provided by the providing district. So if we were to pay for certain health services for kids from I don't know, the Syracuse area or Westchester County, and there were some concrete expenses associated with that, the expectation would be that those school districts where those kids live would pay those bills. I don't know how that would work in practice, but that is how it should work in theory.
It just seems like such an odd thing to begin with, like a private expensive school like that. You would think that they would have that under their umbrella, that would, I don't know. I mean, again, I'm not sure how all this works, but it just seems like a strange thing that they wouldn't have their own everything, whether it be speech therapists or any type of health services. So I don't know, just seemed kind of odd, but
yeah,
good to know.
Capital project update. Anything in addition to what was in the narrative?
Nothing new.
No.
Okay. Are we going to get an obvious question? The landscaping and the runoff?
I emailed Schoolhouse. I emailed Paul today to
Okay.
say, where are we? They've reached out to us, they're trying to get a schedule and consultant and pass
Something back to us soon. So, yes.
Great, thank you. It's my new dog walking route and it disturbs me every time I walk by. So.
Every time I drive down by that wall, I'm just more impressed. Every time I drive by there, it looks so awesome. I mean, the sign, everything out there, it just looks great. So does the elementary school, but nice work.
Both too. Next up is the minutes. That's under consent. Then personnel items. Long-term teaching staff appointment. Recommended action is upon recommendation of the superintendent, appoint Sarah Carnival. Is that pronounced? Carnivale, thank you. As long-term math teacher in the middle high school, replacing Amy Strack beginning April 12th, 2021 until June 25th, 2021. Salary will be at the per diem rate of $306.37, step 15 of the teacher's salary schedule of the 2020-2021 school year. Benefits to be prorated. This is not a probationary appointment. May I have a motion to accept this long-term teaching staff appointment?
Yes.
Thank you, Liam. Thank you, Colleen. All in favor? Are we at 6 now?
I'll just mark my person.
Okay. And check with her when she gets back.
Well, she doesn't.
Okay. CSEA staff retirement. Upon recommended action of the superintendent, accept the retirement of Forrest Randy Winch, outside custodian in the district, effective October 15th, 2021. May I have a motion for this retirement, please?
Yes.
Thank you, Colleen.
Yes.
Thank you, Daniel.
Whatever.
Any discussion?
I would just like to mention that Randy Winch is one of those people that you look forward to working with every day. He's a terrific guy. He's a committed and dedicated worker. I spend time with Randy sometimes early in the morning assessing the roads. Dana works with Randy. Randy takes care of the fields and the parking lots and you name it, and he can do it. We're just really appreciative that we've had Randy here for the second half of his career. So Randy's been here for 20 years, and now as he leaves in October, he's going to be missed. We're going to be sorry to see him go.
He's a wonderful employee, and he was pretty much here through all of our children growing up through here, and just a friendly, caring, really great guy. And again, it's tough to lose those people, and big shoes to fill. So we'll miss him. Appreciate all of his work.
If there's nothing else, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0. CSEA resignation. Upon recommendation, the superintendent accept the resignation of Josh Favreau, head bus driver, effective May 1st, 2021. May I have a motion, please?
Yes.
Thank you, Colleen.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Joan. Joan seconded. Discussion on,
Did we just hire him? I can't remember. Has he been?
So Josh has been our transportation director for 2 years, approximately 2 years. Before that, he was our mechanic
Okay.
for 2 or 3 years. Josh is one of those good and talented people that you don't want to lose. So I'm really sorry that we're at this point right now. But we wish Josh well. He's got a new opportunity that he can see.
He took Jeff's place, didn't he?
Yes.
Okay.
I apologize.
So everybody who wants to vote, all in favor?
Aye.
National Library.
Next up is National Library Day. A motion to acknowledge April 16th, 2021 is National Library Day. That motion, please.
Yes.
Thank you, Dan. Second. Thank you, Daniel. There's a card going around, I believe, 2 cards. Can Joan hear me?
Can you hear Joan? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that. All in favor of this?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
6-0, motion passes. Donation acceptance. Recommended action is whereas the Lake Placid Central School Board of Education Policy 6255, donations, gifts, and grants to the district, allows for the superintendent of schools to accept on behalf of the board gifts and donations having a value of less than $1,500, whereas monies have been received in the total of $2,200 from the Sybil Pickett Fund and the Magnus Family Fund for the purposes of funding the summer book shopping. Therefore, be it resolved in accordance with policy 6255, the Board of Education hereby accepts the check from the Sybil A. Pickett Fund, Magnus Family Fund in the amount of $2,200 for the project noted above. May I have a motion to accept this donation?
Yes.
Mom, that's
Martha,
bringing out.
second. Joan, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for your help.
Yeah, because I can't see. I'm doing board docs.
She can't see, I can't speak. It's, any comments on this?
Right.
Let's push. If not, may I have a vote, please?
All in favor?
Motion passes 6-0. E.M. Cooper Memorial Library Proposition Resolution. Recommended action is add to the proposition of the E.M. Cooper, Memorial Library to the May 18, 2021 ballot as follows. Shall the trustees of the Lake Placid Central School District adopt the funding of the E.M. Cooper Memorial Library, which is raised by an annual levy of a tax upon the taxable real property of the Lake Placid Central School District to be increased from $14,820 to $15,470. They have a motion to make this increase. So moved. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Colleen. Any discussion?
Small amount.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Not much.
All in favor, please?
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion passes 6-0. Irish Sports, spring. Oh, boy.
Gotta do this.
Here we go with the Governor Cuomo and the Essex County. Whereas Governor Cuomo has authorized that high-risk sports can begin on February 1st in New York State, whereas Essex County Department of Health issued a statement allowing higher-risk scholastic sports can resume on February 1st, 2021, following the interim guidance for sports and recreation during the COVID-19 public health emergency. Whereas on February 16th, 2021, the Board of Education voted to allow high-risk varsity sports to begin at the Lake Placid Central School effective March 1st, 2021, using the guidelines issued by the Essex County Department of Health. Therefore, be it resolved, following high-risk sports are approved to begin on Monday, April 26, 2021. Boys modified and varsity lacrosse. Be it further resolved that the high-risk sports adhere to Essex County Department of Health guidelines. May I have a motion?
Yes.
Thank you, Colin.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Joan. I heard you from afar. Any discussion on the lacrosse?
I feel like it makes sense. Late in the hour of the day. But I guess I still remain opposed to I guess it's still down to by next year everybody will be vaccinated that will has the opportunity to be. And I guess that to me is still the benchmark for
Thank you. Any other comments?
I think this is one of those sports though that fortunately is a little bit different because they're outside. And there is still some risk, but probably much lower than it was with the hockey kids or basketball or whatever.
If nothing else, may I please have a vote? All in favor?
I'm a no.
Opposed? Joan was,
Joan is a yes. I don't know. I didn't see.
A little bit too much consensus here tonight, so.
She's a
Joan's a
yes.
yes.
Wait.
That was a yes.
thank you for your duty. Spring coaches 2021 recommended action upon the recommendation of the superintendent The listed coaches and volunteers for the 2021 spring season, as noted below. Excuse me, approve the coaches and volunteers as below. They are listed for you. May I have a motion, please? Second. Colleen. Any discussion?
Roger, with golf, it says varsity golf, but don't the middle school children also have access to golf, like sixth grade? Is that part of that one team?
It is,
Okay.
yes. Not sixth grade, 7th through 12th. Sixth grade has has some volunteer opportunities, and we've had some. It's been a couple of years now, but we've had some of our sixth graders learn golf and practice golf on. Do you remember which golf was it on Lake Placid? Of course, well, yeah, we've had some limited sixth grade golf time, but it's 7 through 12.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you get like parents or volunteers to help out with the sixth graders, or?
It's a good question. I don't have a quick answer for you. Yeah.
Are you volunteering?
Oh.
No,
But we have a big golf family, so
Okay.
I'm asking
For next year, yes.
Next year.
Okay.
Okay, regarding the spring coaches, no further discussion, so all in favor?
aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Joni said yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sometimes motion passes 6 yes, 0. On the 9F, the board conference approval was under consent and special education was under consent. Are there any questions regarding the April 2021 packet?
I know. Sorry. There's no other good on the cause.
Okay. Jumping ahead of it.
Yes.
She's not talking fast
Got
enough
it.
for you.
It's over.
Okay, we'll enter the adjournment phase. Next meeting and dates, they're listed for you. The next one, the important one is April 20th. That'll be next Tuesday. The approval of the budget as well as the vote on the BOCES budget, correct?
Yes.
And then we have the budget hearing, so I will leave these for you. Any old agenda topics? New agenda topics? You all know at any time you can email myself or Karen with those thoughts, ideas on topic, agenda topics. Okay, if there's nothing else, I will recommend action is to entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll second it.
Joan second.
Joe, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposition? None. Motion passes. 0 to 60.
Hi, Joan.